Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's session. I want to thank you all for taking the time out of your schedules to join us here today as we explore the evolving landscape and environmental reporting on product transparency with our webinar titled Mastering LCAs, PCFs, and EPDs for Global Compliance. Over the next 55 minutes, we intend to break down these three key technical frameworks that are rapidly becoming essential for global market access. But before we begin, I would like to give a brief introduction on the speakers today. So my name is Ferdia O'Leary. I'm the Carbon Footprint Manager here at Green Earth. I started my career as a climate scientist in working with climate modeling before I moved into the corporate level ESG world. So for the last number of years, I've been working in the US, in Europe, and the Nordics with corporate customers across various sectors, helping them track, measure, and manage their carbon emissions and their life cycle data. And with me today from One Click LCA, I have Manal.
Thank you, Ferdia. Welcome, everyone. So my name is Manal. I'm account manager at One Click LCA, the first AI-powered platform in the LCA world. And our goal is to help organizations of every size, global brands, mid-market manufacturers, and the consultants who support them turn buildings and products LCA, EPDs, into real decisions. And I'm happy to be here with you today.
Great. Thank you very much, Manal. So, yeah, I think we're going to fire right ahead. And I just want to outline before we begin the core objective of this webinar. So rather than just discussing these terms, LCA, PCF, and EPDs from a purely academic or theoretical perspective, I think our objective today is going to be highly practical. We want to show you exactly how the regulatory and commercial worlds are shifting, and more importantly, how you can use a system to automate and scale your data smoothly. So, to provide you a clear roadmap for our time together during this webinar, we've structured this session to essentially mirror the actual journey your product data takes when moving from the raw material stage to a verified corporate asset. So we're going to begin by establishing a technical baseline from our core terminology immediately before anchoring those definitions in the regulatory shifts and specific 2026 deadlines currently impacting global market access. The second part of the hour then is going to be dedicated entirely to practical application. So where we will detail how Green Earth utilizes the automated one-click system to streamline product level calculations. And this will lead directly into a live software demonstration with Manal, so you can see the interface in action and how everything works.
Sorry, everyone. I think we've lost Ferdia for a second.
Hello, everyone. This is Pedro Zimmer from GreenNet. It seems like Ferdia is going through some network issues. We should be back shortly.
Okay, sorry about that, everybody. I think we just had a slight technical glitch there. I'm going to just pick up again where I left off, and I think everything should be okay now as we move forward. So thank you for your patience on that. As I was just saying, I'm getting into about Green Earth. So to understand why Green Earth specifically has partnered with One-Click system, I think it's helpful to first look at our core expertise. So at Green Earth, we are an established, publicly listed end-to-end developer of high-quality nature-based projects. So we create large-scale, high-quality projects, and our long-standing work is defined by the strict international standard setters we use for certification, meaning that we are kind of deeply embedded in the rigorous mechanics of environmental verification and data integrity across various different sectors. So over the years, we've consistently helped our corporate partners navigate complex carbon landscapes, particularly as they face the growing challenge of mapping and proving their Scope 3 supply chain footprints with localized, product-specific, verified data. So Green Earth really strives to secure that data integrity, providing the long-term technical transparency that you need to turn high-level commitments that you might have in your business into auditable, verifiable commercial reality. So the way we wanted to do this was to partner with One-Click. And historically, when looking at LCAs, the process of developing a verified life cycle assessment or a formal environmental product declaration has been quite a significant operational hurdle. In the traditional setting, these studies often took kind of several months to complete and required a heavy reliance on specialized kind of third-party consultants, with costs maybe going from 10 to 15 to 20,000 euro per individual product or individual SKU. So for any organization with a dynamic or a growing product catalog, this was a fundamentally unscalable model, and it acted as a bottleneck for your market access. And it was this friction that we identified, and it's why we have integrated our capabilities. So Green Earth now provides that granular environmental asset management and supply chain expertise that you need and is required to sort of navigate the complex data landscapes that we currently see ourselves in, while the One-Click system then provides the underlying automated engine to handle the calculations at scale. And together we've established a pathway that transforms the raw manufacturing inputs into the published audit-ready documents faster and more cost-effectively than has ever previously been possible in this sphere. So defining the foundation. So this is where we're really going to start. So having established why we've built this faster pathway to compliance, our first priority now is ensuring we are standing on a foundation of absolute technical clarity. And in the modern market, I'm sure a lot of you have heard the terms LCA, PCF, and EPD quite frequently, and they're used quite interchangeably. But this is kind of a major commercial oversight. These are very, very separate technical tools governed by distinct ISO standards, and they each serve a specific role in the regulatory machine. So what exactly is the difference between these terms? So to understand how your product data matures, we first need to sort of distinguish between the two primary ways we measure impact before they even reach a customer. So a life cycle assessment is the most comprehensive tool in our arsenal to do this. It provides a holistic picture by measuring multiple environmental indicators. So you're talking about things like water consumption, resource depletion, even soil acidification and eutrophication, these kinds of indicators across the entire lifespan of a product. In contrast to this, then, we have a PCF, or a product carbon footprint. And this is a more targeted subset of that overall study. So it focuses exclusively on one specific metric, which is global warming potential. In other words, the total kilograms of CO2 equivalent in that product. And to ground these definitions, let's look at how they apply to a single product. So I'm going to give you an example here of a high performance window that I'll refer to throughout this webinar as we go along. So if Green Earth runs a full LCA on this specific high performance window, we're calculating the energy used to mine the raw aluminium that's going to be the frame, the water utilized in the glass in the manufacturing plant, the environmental cost of disposing of these kind of heavy glass panels 20, 30, 40, even 50 years down the line from now. However, if a contractor then comes along and asks our sales team or your sales team specifically for the PCF in that same window, they're essentially just asking us to filter out all the other environmental indicators from the full life cycle assessment in order to provide just that single carbon number in kilograms of CO2 equivalent. So while your internal resources could technically like maybe estimate these figures, if you've been doing it on spreadsheets in Excel, they would be quite high level estimations because it's very difficult to get access to the best databases and the granular data that you need to do these calculations. And they, regardless, remain unverified claims. But by using one-click system, we process that raw data according to the strictest ISO standards and indeed the European standards for whatever product range that you are working in. And we prepare it for an independent auditor to sign off on and give you a final document. And this final verified document is then your environmental product declaration, or your EPD. So that was kind of a lot of information with the definition. So I think this visual might kind of help tie these things together. And we can see the full process here on the life cycle diagram. So starting on the left-hand side of the page, we're looking at the cradle to gate phase. And this covers modules A1 through A3. So using our high performance window again as our example, this represents the total environmental footprint before the product even leaves the manufacturer. So it accounts for the raw material extraction, the A1 stage there of the aluminium that's going to make the frame, the transport of the glass sheets to your assembly plant, the A2, and the electricity running within your factory or the manufacturer's factory where the unit is being manufactured and sealed and processed. However, the true life cycle assessment continues much further downstream, as you can see from the rest of the diagram. So modules A4 and A5 account for the logistics of shipping that window to a job site or a customer and the energy then that's used to install it. You can see from module B, this tracks the use phase, the emissions from that whole phase when the product is in use, measuring how effectively that window insulates a building, for example, over 30 years. And then finally, you have module C, C1 to C4, which is the end of life, and whether that aluminium frame can, let's say, be cleanly unbolted and recycled, or if the unit is just going to be taken out of a building and put into a landfill. All of these decisions that your product have are going to change the data, the LCA, and the actual results of the product itself, what it can and can't do. So when a developer or like a tier 1 contractor builds a sustainable property, they require your verified A1 to A3, so your product level carbon data, as a critical starting point, so they can then accurately model how your window or whatever your product might be impacts the building's total footprint over its entire life cycle. So it's more now than just the price and offering a competitive pricing. You need to have this data behind every product that you are either manufacturing, selling, or buying. So following these physical stages of an LCA, and we understand, okay, well, look, these are the life cycle stages. This is what's involved in each. The question then becomes, how do we actually translate that complex manufacturing reality, all those processes, into a verified document without just getting bogged down and lost in all the data? So this is achieved through a standardized 4-phased process. So goal and scope definition, life cycle inventory, impact assessment, and interpretation. So obviously we begin in phase 1 where we define the goal and the scope. So this is using our window example again. This is where we establish the functional unit, which is a critical first step when conducting any kind of work like this. So for instance, our functional unit for the window would be 1 square meter of high performance glazing with a 30-year optional or operational lifespan, but it can be 1 kilo of steel beam for 20 years, whatever your functional unit is, but that's a critical first step. After that, then we move into phase 2, the life cycle inventory. And this is traditionally the most data intensive stage. So this is where having an automated system like the one with one click truly streamlines this kind of workload and moves it away from just working on Excels. So we gather the precise data of every gram of aluminium, every piece of kind of rubber sealant that would be in the frame, the exact volume of any chemicals, any gases used in the manufacturing process, any materials of the ancillary process in the manufacturing, any cutoffs from the aluminium, these kinds of things is what we're looking at in phase 2, as well as the utility bills from the assembly floor, from the manufacturing for the energy input that went into that process. Phase 3 then is the impact assessment. What the system does is take these raw material inputs and converts them into specific environmental indicators, showing us exactly where the emission hotspots are going to be located within the supply chain, which is critical when you want to make strategic decisions based on emission reduction. And then finally, we reach phase 4, interpretation, which is where Green Earth helps you turn compliance into the strategy itself. So rather than just producing a report and ticking a box for compliance sake, we gained this actionable kind of insight. So we discovered that simply maybe changing a frame supplier or adjusting a manufacturing process might reduce your total footprint by 15%, 20%, whatever it might be. So this is where the product comparison kind of really comes into its own, and been able to interpret these results to make the strategic decisions to help kind of save you money and also to be more efficient with your data going forward. And this really, what it does is allow you to refine your product for a more competitive market edge, even before the final audit for the EPD ever takes place, so within the LCA stage of this. However, once we have navigated those assessment phases, we've gone through the LCA model, we've looked at the 4 phases, and we've interpreted our results. The next kind of logical step then is determining how to present those findings to the market in a way that's both kind of legally and commercially robust. So this is achieved through an environmental product declaration, or an EPD, which is the formalized public-facing document that translates our back-end lifecycle data, our calculation process, into the verified corporate asset. Because the one-click system standardizes this output under international rules like the EN 15804 and the ISO standards. It ensures that your environmental impact is calculated using a methodology recognized and accepted across all international borders and regions. So I think a good way to maybe think about this is to sort of visualize how an LCA and EPD interact. Think of the EPD as sort of your nutrition label that you might get on a food product. This is kind of your standardized nutrition label, whereas the life cycle assessment, the LCA, is the deep dive laboratory study. It's the exhaustive process, the internal accounting of knowing every ingredient, knowing the makeup of every ingredient, how they interact with each other, and the environmental impact of throughout the product's entire life. So the EPD, however, this is the standardized public-facing label that your customers and regulators then actually use to compare your performance against the rest of the market. So you can have the verified label without the deep, or you cannot have the verified label without the deep dive study behind it. That's kind of the critical point. So the real kind of benefit of this for the market is that it effectively replaces any vague kind of marketing terms. Anyone that's claiming to have certain low carbon or high energy efficiency or whatever that might be, it replaces that with a standardized data sheet that remains legally valid for 5 years. And this provides you or your sales team or procurement teams with an authorized, globally accepted commercial passport, essentially, that can be submitted straight into competitive, either public or private green tenders, with absolute confidence that you know what you're putting in is of the highest quality, the best data quality, and aligns with all the standards that it needs to. So to see what this looks like in practice, we've just pulled up a sample EPD here. So you can see the published EPD table on the screen on the right-hand side. You'll notice immediately that this is kind of quite far removed from any traditional, maybe like marketing brochure. It's very much an audible matrix of hard numbers. And this is just a quick snapshot of it, just to give you an idea of how it works. But the table explicitly states your core environmental indicators for any given product, such as your global warming potential, your ozone depletion, your soil acidification, eutrophication, all these indicators, and maps them transparently across the entire life cycle module. So again, going back to that life cycle diagram, from the initial raw materials in A1 all the way down to the end of life stages in C4. And you can pick any of those life cycle stages and see exactly what environmental indicators you have for any given product. So this granular level of detail, this is becoming the kind of mandatory, because it forces true data transparency. So there's no really getting around this anymore. So while a supplier might offer a really nice headline about using low carbon energy in their factory or whatever it might be, this verified table actually reveals the total picture and can be found out very, very quickly if you are making unfounded claims. For example, this unedited holistic view is exactly what is required to satisfy, for anyone in the construction sector, strict kind of building credentials like BREEAM or LEED, which I'm sure many of you might have come across before. And it's in that moment when you kind of win these tenders, like the work that you can put in now with Green Earth and with One Click is what's going to give you kind of the sharpest commercial edge with technical compliance with these kind of strategies that we are putting in place. So just to dive a little bit deeper now, to understand like that commercial edge becomes even more critical when we look at how the regulatory landscape has evolved. So we're going to look at what's kind of happened and maybe what's coming down the line over the next number of years and how it's going to affect certain sectors. So for decades, I think before now, tracking a product's environmental footprint was treated as mainly a voluntary marketing exercise. If you did it, you were praised. You were a pioneer. You were leading the class, and it was really good. But if you didn't, it didn't really have any impact. It sort of had zero impact on your core market access because you could still win tenders and gain contracts even without having this data behind you. But here now, as we move through 2026, that kind of optional era, I think, of reporting is dead and gone. So regulatory bodies, they're moving away from simply taxing carbon at the high corporate entity level. They've tried it for a while, and I think they've realized there's more efficient ways to do this. And right now, what they're doing is instead placing the regulatory focus squarely on the individual physical product itself. So this is quite a large macroeconomic trend that is only increasing in velocity based on what we've seen and the trends that we are looking at over the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, you can see these in place at the moment. I mean, you look at CBAM, the EU's carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is increasing all the time. This applies to active carbon pricing to imported goods based on entirely their level of actual embodied emissions. And I think the message from the global market is quite unmistakable. The way it's moving is that if you cannot prove your environmental metrics with standardized data, your physical product will face either heavy financial penalties or will just be blocked at the border entirely. So just to dive a little bit deeper into the specifics of the regulatory frameworks, to fully appreciate why these supply chain filters are kind of tightening, we need to look at these specific legal anchors. So first, the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with by now. So this is the corporate level mandate for kind of transparency. It creates the direct requirement for LCAs because it forces now large companies across Europe to report on their Scope 3 emissions. So even if you're sitting there and like, okay, we weren't involved in the first wave and your company isn't a direct target of the legislation either now or in the future, more than likely your enterprise customers are. So for them to protect their own compliance, they're actively setting up strict procurement data filters. We've seen this day to day with customers that we've worked with. And if you as the supplier cannot provide verified product carbon metrics kind of on demand, essentially what's happening is smaller companies have been systematically filtered out of modern corporate kind of supply chains. And this is irregardless of how competitive your pricing is, because these regulations are becoming more and more strict, and your enterprise customers are realizing we can't make unfounded claims anymore. We have to have the data to the most granular that we want to be able to hit our targets. And if you can't provide that as their supplier, they'll just move on to the next one who can. Next to the CSRD, then we have the CPR, the Construction Products Regulation, so which specifically targets kind of structural assets. And the CPR is moving toward a future where environmental disclosures, usually in the form of an EPD, are becoming mandatory part of the construction process. So essentially what this means is without verified data, your product could eventually lose its legal right to be sold in the European or UK markets. So these are two that are obviously kind of bringing this forward, but the most expansive of these frameworks that is affecting this is the ESPR, or the Eco Design for Sustainable Products Regulation. Officially entered into force, I think, in July 2024, but historically old eco design rules, they were quite narrow. I don't know, maybe some of you might have or complied with them in the past, but almost exclusively they applied to household appliances that plugged into a wall. But the new ESPR has been kind of, it's much larger now than it was, and it changes sort of everything. So it grants the legal authority to enforce strict sustainability and circularity requirements across virtually all categories of physical goods, so from raw, intermediate materials to the finished consumer products. And to really hammer home now how this is landing on the ground, we only have to look at a couple of specific regions where it's already kind of in place, and their active requirements. So the Nordics, for example, as well as France, this market in the last few years has pivoted quite aggressively, where you literally cannot secure a building permit now or clear public procurement gates for certain projects without a verified LCA and a corresponding EPD. So this is kind of already in place. People are realizing this, and it's going to block out a lot of people if you haven't done this work already. In the UK as well, related to the Nordics and France, I know major public infrastructure projects and private enterprise buyers actually, they're actively introducing what they're calling the sort of the buy clean filters that essentially mimic these exact requirements for core materials and components. And this just sort of brings us back to our example earlier of this high performance window. So under these tightening European rules, a buyer or a compliance officer is no longer just checking if the window that we're producing saves heating energy while sitting on a wall. The regulation now forces a comprehensive look at the entire physical asset. It needs to know and evaluate how easily it can be repaired. Is there a presence of any hazardous materials or chemicals in the sealants? And whether the design itself allows the glass to be cleanly separated from the aluminium frame. Can it be recycled at the end of its life, or does it need to be just thrown and crushed into a landfill? So if you're a manufacturer now looking to retain market access or export anywhere into these high European or high value European UK markets, you're no longer just competing on kind of price and quality. You're competing against local regulatory gates that require a sort of a technical passport for your product. So this kind of leads us to the next stage, the digital product passport. So to understand how authorities intend to manage this level of tracking across what's going to be millions and millions of physical products, we have these digital product passports, the DPP, being introduced. And it was in the pipeline for a while, but it's in practice now for some sectors. And I know the European Commission, they've already mandated that the central IT infrastructure, so the EU Central Registry, must be fully live by the 19th of July, 2026. So very close to where we are now. And we can see this blueprint already in the EU battery passport, which is already coming into force. And it's becoming mandatory by February 2027. That is the deadline. So for industries, if you're in automotive, if you're in energy storage, things like that, battery manufacturers now, every single battery must carry a unique digital ID that tracks its carbon footprint, its material origin, and the recycled content from the mine to the recycling facility. So following this template, the next wave of mandates is already scheduled for 26 and 27. And they're going to be looking at priority sectors. They're looking at things like textiles, like iron, steel, aluminium. These kinds of areas are what's kind of coming down the line. So the DPP essentially is going to be a really efficient tool. It acts as the public-facing delivery mechanism for the verified EPD data that we've been discussing up to now. So once you have all that, it's the physical connection to that data. So if your product, whether it's the high-performance window that we have or just a structural steel beam or a battery or whatever it might be, if it lacks that machine-readable data, the backbone to feed into the scanner for the DPP, it simply just won't clear any modern enterprise inventory checkpoints or kind of international custom borders, because this is going to be what's going to help your products move around, where suppliers, construction managers, whatever it might be, are going to pull up the DPP. And if it's there, great, they can move forward. If not, it's okay, on to the next one. So these are just some of the key target industries for regulators that they're looking at now. So when you look at kind of this timeline, you can see that on the first mandatory test of this new infrastructure, it's officially going to hit the market on February 18, 2027 under the EU battery regulation. But there has been kind of build-ups to that within the last sort of year, 18 months. So with this one, every single industrial and EV battery over 2 kilowatt hours must carry this live QR code mapping its raw material sourcing. This is the deadline when you have to have it. So looking at the raw materials, the carbon footprint, and the recycled content. So this is kind of the blueprint being tested in real time. This is what they're starting with in the EU, and right behind is kind of the second wave then, looking at textiles, heavy construction materials, specifically maybe iron, steel, aluminium, with these mandatory regulations landing between 27 and 2028. Textiles, this is also beginning to feel the pressure. It's starting to tighten a little. Large enterprises now facing a strict legal ban on the destruction of unsold clothing. That's kind of tightening up, while the subsequent DPP, Digital Product Passport, mandates will track total chemical content and recyclability directly in this scannable tag that they have. So this is kind of the first part of this was just sort of breaking down the definition. So I hope we're still on the same page and we're all still together in terms of the life cycle data, the product carbon footprints, the regulation, how this is going to change, and kind of the commercial edge that you can gain from this. But what I want to do now is sort of view, like, I think it's easy to view this roadmap so far as kind of a daunting, like, data barriers. Like, okay, we don't even know where to start. Like, okay, I know we have the life cycle assessment, but how do we get the data, this kind of thing. So what we're going to focus on now in this next section, it's going to pivot from the pressure of this kind of regulatory mandates towards a more active operational solution. So by combining Green Earth's expertise with the automated engine of one-click LCA, we have streamlined how your company can handle now this product level carbon tracking and this data. So a lot of the time what we're seeing now is people coming to us with questions, and I think the biggest mistake organizations make is not knowing enough maybe about this specific topic and thinking, okay, we need specialized people. We need to hire someone with PhDs in engineering, or go through what's probably going to be a slow and really, really expensive external consultant to be able to archive and gain all these metrics. Instead, what we're offering, our partnership removes all that technical friction from that process, making EPDs kind of faster, more intuitive, and the key, entirely scalable, no matter how many products you have within your inventory. So I think to truly appreciate the value of this automation, we first need to remember what the traditional baseline kind of was. So historically, I think executing a single product LCA or publishing just a single individual EPD, it was months long. You're talking 4, 6, 8, even longer months of navigating kind of spreadsheets, trying to get engineering input, maybe looking at the manual consultancy path. Okay, that's going to be 15, 20,000 per SKU. Not having access to the right emission factors, not knowing if your data is of the highest quality, which just was, there was a lot of bottlenecks in that process. So for companies managing a dynamic catalog with dozens of products or hundreds of product variations, that manual model, it's simply impossible to scale. If you really wanted to put your head together for 8 to 12 months, and you probably could get one, but if you have 100 products then that need to come after that, it's just not going to be possible. So our ecosystem now at the moment rewrites this timeline entirely by deploying this end-to-end cloud automation and transforming what was the sort of multi-month process into a rapid, more multi-week software reality process. So what we can do with this, what this kind of timeline shows, is the availability to publish from 1 to 100 verified EPDs on schedule. It can be more than 100, but this is just a way that you perhaps can scale if you are new into this. So the major roadblock most companies were facing is figuring out how to scale compliance across a vast catalog. It can be quite daunting if you have hundreds of products to be like, okay, well, what are we actually doing here? We don't want to just drain the entire company's operational efficiency by putting everyone on this. What's the most efficient way to attack this? So the beauty of this architecture that we're offering is that it's a solution built to scale alongside your kind of business journey as you scale as well. So there's no need to tackle an entire inventory on day one if you don't want to. So the system allows kind of an organization, if you want to just start strategically, if you want to launch a pilot project targeting maybe your first 1 to 10, even just 1 to 5, and do a product comparison and look at it that way within your first year. So once you have that baseline model that's kind of set, what the platform then enables you to do is to reach, to extend, to cover maybe 11 to 25, 11 to 50, whatever it might be, expanding to variations and different product families using the exact same sort of verified foundation that you've put in year one. And from there, the process can completely scale up to 50 or however many EPDs annually using these specialized tool sets for complex product categories. And essentially, ultimately, this framework allows a business to standardize its entire product portfolio. Because the data flows into a verified system supporting kind of API integrations and connections, publications happen consistently across product ranges while maintaining the absolute data integrity. So looking ahead, this structured data management allows organizations like yourselves to, you can see what's coming down the line with regulations, and you can anticipate this for whatever future requirements you may need. And this ensures your environmental data sets, they're already organized to feed into a digital product passport the moment that comes online, and you need to make that connection for any specific sectors where it will be mandatory. So just before we move on and Manal takes us through a live demonstration of the system, I just wanted to talk a little bit about maybe your path, and I will come back from the demonstration. We'll talk a little bit more about data collection, who to go to, where to get it. But in terms of your overall path for 2026, just to close out this strategy section, step one here is to audit your data. So you want to pull your operations team together. You want to identify any current gaps in your supply chain transparency, so you know exactly where your baseline stands. Step two, you want to define then your product families. So you don't need to complicate this initial phase. So you look at your product catalog strategically and you determine which SKUs, which products require PCFs and EPDs first, more than likely based on your highest volume lines and what regulations are coming down that will affect these the most. Step three then is to leverage the digital tools that can be at your disposal. I think it's time to transition away from the spreadsheets and move towards an automated LCA software. It gives so much more benefits, obviously the efficiency and aligning with different regulations, but also the ability to scale and eliminate any manual bottlenecks to protect your workflow from any sort of costly human errors that you get through Excel or anything like that. It completely takes that risk out of the process. So the regulatory timelines now, these are locked in the next coming years, but the transition, I think, is still a little bit behind, but it doesn't have to be overwhelming. I think what you can do is just contact part of our team and just schedule a session with the experts that we have on hand here at Green Earth, and just to sort of guide you through, okay, we just don't know where to start. We don't know anything about this. What's just step one? And just taking that first step, understanding the overall process, what you can do, what you need to do, I think is a great just first way to sort of build into something like this, where traditionally there hasn't been a huge amount of information, and if it's new to you in the company. So I think what we're going to do is just pause here and to show you specifically now in practical terms how the system works, everything that I've been discussing up to now. Manal is going to take over and show you a live demonstration of the one-click system. Sorry, Manal, I think you're just on mute there.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
Thank you, Feria, for the transition. So I was saying, I hope you're all keeping up here, and I will need some of your attention over the next few minutes. I will show you mostly two tools that work hand in hand to help manufacturers turn sustainability data into real business results. And the first one will be EPD Generator. So here we have the homepage. We're inside one-click LCA. And so we'll go here for our EPD generator tool, and I'm in the homepage of our EPD generator tool. I have already created a project to go faster in this demo. So you'll notice the first thing the tool asks is just basic stuff. What kind of product, which markets, which standards you want to follow and you want to comply with. They're all built in it, so you don't need to be an LCA expert to pick the right one, and the tool guides you through every step. And the main idea here is pre-verified templates. The calculation methods and data structure behind this tool have already been reviewed, approved by an independent program operator. That means when your EPD eventually goes to a third-party verifier, most of the heavy lifting has already been done. So we are talking weeks instead of months here. And here I'm going to show you on this Purify tool, so how to add all the data. So my colleagues have worked to build many templates of products. And for instance, here, I'm going to just choose a wood board for you for the demonstration. So a wood-based insulation. And for this, I'm going to copy the data from that template, and it will input all of the information you will need there. And the calculation will goes, and you will be able to find all the results in that page. Well, not all the results, but all of the lifecycle assessments workflow that you can have here on the left of my screen. So you'll be able to add any manufacturer information that you want, any product information identification also that you want. Just put some random data here for the demo. And on all of the modules, especially the resource materials, you will have already integrated all of the resources for this specific product. So here you can have all of your resources. You're able also to adapt, change any quantity you want, any comments you want to add for the verifier and for your team to work on, any transport method which can be different from the one which is here, and be able to modulate every information there. So the tool gives you the templates tailored to your industry. As I said, we can have any product you want. And another way to do it is you can also upload the bill of materials in an Excel format or any ERP you're using internally. What the product is made of and how much you can change and customize everything. And you have access to a huge library of preloaded materials and manufacturing data. So I'm not hunting around for any emission factors, and that alone used to take weeks. So then we'll move to the result page. Here's the moment that used to take weeks of consultant times. I click calculate, and the tool instantly, let me show you, calculates, and the tool produces the full life cycle results. So you'll have every environmental impact depending on the regulation you want to follow and you want to have access, and you'll have all the calculation for global warming potential, ozone depletion, for instance, acidification, and all of the indicators the standard requires. So here you'll have the data in a table form, and you can also be able to have access to any chart you want, most original ones that you can have on a report. And then the part manufacturers love, and I click again, and here you get access to every report you want. You can have a Word document, a project EPD as a Word document, so your EPD is already clear and ready to be sent. And which is really interesting here, from here, you can send the document straight to the EPD hub through our integrated workflow. For most products, you're looking at a verified publishable EPD in as little as 2 weeks. And here you can submit for verification your EPD. So things are really simple, and what I want to add is maybe the scalability of this tool. If you have a big product portfolio, hundreds, thousands of variants, you can also use sister EPD and add on your product sister EPD and or API also integration to scale this up massively. Some of our customers publish more EPDs in 1 year than I have done in the last decades, for instance. So this is how the first tool, EPD generated, work. The second part here is once your EPD is published, created and published, what happens after that? Here, I wanted to show you our material compass. The EPD generator helps you tell the world how sustainable your product is. And we have a second tool, EPD usage analytics, tells you whether the world is listening to it. And together, they close the loop between sustainability efforts and commercial outcome. So once your EPD is out there, it lives inside our one-click LCA database, which you can find here in Material Compass. And this is where architects, engineers, consultants, and contractors come to pick materials for their projects. Thousands of specifiers working on real buildings around the world are searching for this database every day. So let's dive into the EPD usage analytics for your products. So this report shows you exactly what's happening with your product in that environment. Sorry. So this is the main dashboard, and at a glance, you can see your EPD, how many views, how many time specifiers looked at your EPD, how many times your EPD has been selected and added to a project. And you can also get access to regional breakdown, usage by project countries. So instantly, you can see this product manager were viewed, like, for instance, 1,000 times this last month. We can also filter here per last year, last quarter, and you get access to all of this information really instantly. So let's say I'm a sustainable manager and I want to know which of my products are pulling their weight. I sort by selection and I immediately can see here the top products. For instance, let's say last quarter, and get access also, and I think it's maybe most important, to the underperformers. And maybe a product I invested in heavily is barely being looked at. So that's a positioning problem, that's a marketing problem, and you can have the data to act on it. This tool is also showing you the next expiring products. So EPDs are mostly typically available for 5 years. So here you can see which products will expire and plan all your EPD renewal with that information. And here you can also get access. So the top products you can get access to all of the list of the top products that you will have and see any information also you want regarding this product. So you can really quickly have access to the environmental impact of this product, have access to manufacturer and everything you want for this specific product. For maybe some product manager here, you can also use this dashboard to plan your EPD renewal. Renew the one that performs, consolidate or retire maybe the one that don't. And you don't have to review every EPD by default just because it's on the calendar. You can use that data to perform and straight to action on the point. So maybe to bring it all together, the EPD generator lets your products verified third-party validated EPDs in weeks instead of months. And EPD usage analytics then shows you how you exactly paying for and how is it paying for in the real world. Together, they're taking EPDs from being a compliance checkbox to strategic commercial assets. And you spend less time producing them and you get more value out of them once they're live. So hope I didn't lose you there. Don't know if you have any questions, do not hesitate to drop them in the chat and we'll get back to them at the end. Thanks, Ferdia.
Thank you, Manal. Yeah, no, that was great.
Pass you the torch.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Manal. I think that gave just a really good insight into what we are actually kind of talking about. I mean, after the first kind of 30, 40 minutes to kind of give you the understanding and then to actually talk about, okay, this is how it can be and reduce operational efficiency gains and be more efficient for you and your business. And then to take us through that demonstration, I think ties it nicely together. As you said there, if there is any questions, just put them in the chat and we'll get back to them hopefully at the end or after the webinar, or if you want to have any more detailed conversations, you can just follow up with us on that. What I want to talk about now, so moving away from the live interface and just back to our core presentation, I think it's becoming quite clear how shifting from the sort of raw data to a more structured automation, it really helps transform what can be a complex requirement into a much more kind of commercial asset for you guys where this is going to be relevant. So within like a few minutes remaining now, I just want to focus on the critical operational impacts from this approach. So firstly, establishing a verified baseline allows your organization to consistently compete and win public tenders. And I think as international procurement protocols introduce strict sort of carbon gaps, having an audit-ready data set ensures that your products clear these mandatory prerequisites automatically. So protecting your access to the market. Second, I think this transparency enables sort of premium branding. So if you are making claims with regards to your products, net zero or lower carbon or whatever it might be, this data is the backup to these environmental claims. We're kind of a bulletproof third-party verified data, completely eliminates any risk that you might be putting yourselves at of greenwashing. And it's something we've seen in the past. People don't think there's any problems with it, but there is more regulation coming around the use of carbon neutral and terms like this. But any claims that you do make, you don't want to be caught with any risk of greenwashing. So this kind of backs up with kind of verified data, any of those claims that you do want to make as a company for your products. Furthermore, preparing your data early, I think, allows your business to sort of de-risk compliance. Like, it insulates your operations from any shifting global cross-border tariffs and any upcoming regulatory mandates. So beyond defensive compliance, I think this system delivers an immediate sort of eco-design return on investment. So the automation framework, it maps production footprints to pinpoint material inefficiencies. So this is where the product comparisons become really, really relevant. And this can help you drive down costs while automatically securing preferred supplier status. So it might help you reduce emissions, obviously, but you might even see, okay, this is where we have certain emission hotspots. This is a kind of a quite cost-intensive material. We can replace it with this material, and kind of, it's sort of a two birds with one stone: drive down costs and carbon emissions at the same time. Yeah, so I think those are kind of some of the main benefits to business and sort of strategic growth drivers that we have. And ultimately what this does is it shifts your data from sort of a defensive compliance exercise, something we have to do just to tick a box, into what can be a really, really offensive kind of commercial strategy that builds sort of long-term equity and sort of very, very granular, bulletproof data going forward for your company that will prepare you for any regulations or mandates that we know are coming or may come down the line in the future. So I think now that you've seen how everything works, the definitions and the system as well, it's about, okay, well, look, if I wanted to start this today, like what do I actually have to do? So I think having a data readiness checklist and mapping this journey out is a key first point. So it kind of brings this strategy to life. The first thing that you'd need to do for your product or product catalogs is identify, identify the bill of materials data. So this requires compiling the exact raw materials and packaging weights per individual product or SKU. So information typically owned by your product R&D and procurement teams. That's where you would be most likely to find this. Some of you might have slightly different teams, but these will be sort of overarching areas where it would be good first place to look. Second, we want to look at the factory energy metrics. So gathering the annual utility data like electricity, gas, water. And the reason we need to do that is because we need to allocate them proportionally to the product volume. You have a product that might be in a manufacturing plant, but many, many other things are also manufactured there. So you need to know specifically what your section, what your share of that energy usage kind of is. So this is where you need to reach out and contact the facility manager, the operations manager of those manufacturing plants. This can sometimes be a tricky thing to do. It might take a little bit of time to reach out to them, but doing it early, they will have this data, which is the thing. They are legally mandated, a lot of them, to have this data, or they will have the invoices, and sometimes just needs to be chased down, but the data will always be there from what we have seen. Third, we address kind of supplier data sets, requesting verified EPDs or PCFs, the product carbon footprints or environmental product declarations, directly from primary upstream manufacturers to capture specific material impacts. And then finally, we map the logistics and the distribution. So all your transport, when, for example, that window moves from the manufacturer to the customer, the building site, wherever it might be. And this is where your supply chain team tracks the average transport distances and shipping modes across the world, the locations, from location to location, measuring out those distances, understanding the weights, all that kind of information from tier one suppliers to either your own facility for more manufacturing or from further distribution from your own locations. And I think what we might just give out, like, for a kind of a vital operational pro tip that we've seen from people doing this so far, is don't let a lack of primary supplier data stall your timeline. Obviously, that's the goal. We want to have as much primary data as we can from our suppliers to make the most accurate kind of LCA or EPD that we can. But if a manufacturer cannot provide a verified kind of document immediately, and you kind of need it right away, what the system can do is utilize kind of global average proxy data to be able to continue the process of building the model and build the foundation, and then you can transition and increase upon that. It's kind of like your scope 3 for your corporate level carbon accounting. You might start with a couple of categories, for example, purchase goods and services. You might have a little bit of spend in there, but you know you're planning to move forward, get as much accurate kind of primary data as you can, which is the key. Because if you're starting off and you're brand new to this, yeah, you might not have everything right away, but that doesn't mean you still can't efficiently do the process and then work on it and enhance it sort of year on year. So I see we're rapidly running out of time. So I think we're going to bring today's session to a close. I want to thank everyone here who showed up for your time and the engagement and the attention that you paid for this webinar. I think it's really, really beneficial to have these types of things, especially as new regulations come in. These terms are cropping up more and more for businesses, to be able to kind of understand them, understand the foundation and how everything works is critical to putting them in place and to make them kind of compliant, but to make them a kind of a competitive market edge for you in your business, for your products. So I think if you have any questions now, we can put them in the chat. We can try and answer some quickly. Otherwise, after this, we will follow up on any questions that we don't get to. We'll reach out by email and give you more detailed answers. And if you would like to book a meeting with either Manal or myself, we will send on our contact details to be able to do that, even just to give you some information based on, okay, where do we start? Where do we go? What do we do in this specific scenario? We would be more than happy to do that for you. So I think in the chat so far, we'll try and take some of these questions. So in what manner can local organizations or local capacity builders be certified on that process for better and lesser costs? I take the case of Rainforest Alliance and bio certification on that process. I see that means within maybe getting a license to the one-click system itself. So I think what, and correct me if I'm wrong, what we can offer here at Green Earth for that capacity for, okay, local organizations or local capacity builders, we can sort of bridge that gap. For smaller organizations, maybe that lack some of the resources, getting a license for a large kind of product volume might be quite expensive. So what Green Earth does is sort of act as the project managers in this sense. This is where the kind of partnership comes in, where we can sort of help you build through, okay, what data do you need? What data do you have? Help you comply with the regulations that might already be in place and do these sort of calculations for you and provide you the interpretation of results. I think that would definitely lessen the costs as opposed to going in and maybe purchasing and training your own people on this yourself, if that answers your question. I think for now that's just what we have time for in the chat. Unfortunately, I see we're just about to go 10 o'clock. So we just got one more quick one in there. Do we know when the DPP is going to be mandatory? Well, I guess that depends on the sector. I mean, if you're in kind of the digital product passports for the batteries currently, that's coming in. It's going to be mandatory in February 2027, I believe. But for other sectors, textiles, steel, like more high intensity construction, or even in healthcare suppliers for the NHS and things like that, it can vary. So it would depend on the sector. But yeah, I think I'm just going to draw a line under there. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming to this webinar. I think it's been really insightful. And as I said, please follow up with us and we will follow up with you after if there is any more specific questions that we can answer. I hope everyone has a good day and we will be in touch soon.